Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
This is also the start of a new series that we're doing here on Wednesday night, and it is using the book Living Originally by Robert Brummett. He is a Unity minister. He was an instructor for both Jean Marie and I, and I'll just tell you, he's my favorite. I have other favorites too, if you're watching, but Robert Brummett was really spectacular in his the wholeness from which he taught, and I just really was impacted by him. So it's a pleasure to use his book, Living Originally. He is also a longtime practitioner in mindfulness techniques, and you may have remembered that we had him as a guest during our SEE week, and some nods, and his mindfulness retreats are very popular, and I think many of our congregation got an experience of him in the same way we did in school. But in this particular series, in this book, he is describing 10 practices that he believes if you apply them with commitment and regularity, that you will be able to transform your life. And the first that we will be talking about this evening is one of the first 5 or core practices that he feels are very useful. They'll be ones that you'll return to over and over again. It's not just step 1, you're done, step 2, you're done, kind of moving on. They'll be sort of tools. They'll be in your toolkit. You'll refer back to them from time to time, and probably reflectively if you practice them enough. In other words, just as on instinct. But tonight I'll be talking about radical self-awareness and the technique that helps us to see more clearly how our minds work, how our ego interferes, and how our true nature can show us the way to freedom and peace. So, Living Originally is an interesting title, and he talks a little bit about that, but he doesn't mean it in the way that we may think of it. We think of an original. We often talk about somebody as very original, meaning that they're very unique. We usually think of them as one of a kind, right? They're original. They are, nobody looks like that. Nobody talks or walks like that, right? Or that if you're living originally, that you're striving to go opposite things, or to be different, just to be different, to stand out. But again, that's not what he's referring to here. What he says is that living originally is living consciously from our origin, from the foundation of our being, from the source of our authentic life. Most of us have a false self that's really compiled and cultivated in our minds over years of thinking and egoing our lives around, like making up stories. I don't know, am I the only one who does that? Where, you don't really have enough information, but you think you do, and so you put together, and jump to a conclusion, and that becomes your truth, your pseudo-truth, until proven otherwise, or embarrassed, or guilted, or shamed, or called on it, or whatever. And then you alter or change accordingly. But we live so much in our heads, it's appalling how little we actually live our lives that are out here in front of us, that are everywhere, that are engaging with everything. And so this practice, anything that you choose to use in this book, Living Originally, you can get his book online, by the way, it is actually going to support you in just looking at your own mind and your own thought process to be able to distinguish, because if you're only seeing what you always see, then you're being it, and you really do not have the power to pull out and see it for what it is. Therefore, you have no choice until you're able to see it. Now I see those were my assumptions, whether they're based on fact or they bear out whether I'm right or wrong or whatever. At least now I see, and I can have the power to choose differently. And therein lies the shift and the change. Just one thought at a time, one awareness at a time, insights begin to arise. He says to live originally is to live from the center of one's being, to live authentically, to not be defined by culture or by environment, to be truly oneself. In order to do that, however, you again have to be aware of where you aren't having original thoughts. You're having repetitive thoughts, habitual patterns, constant running down the same trim lines, right? Over and over again. Trim line, I just made that up. I don't know what that is. But you know, some place where you run the track, like you're running a track all the way around, over and over again, which no wonder we get into depression. No wonder we struggle. No wonder one day sometimes looks like the next day or the day before. There's some places in which we are habitating, habitually thinking, habitually living, that is not the truth of us. And it separates us from what is beautiful and natural and changing all around us in every moment. He says living originally is to live aware of our needs, but not unconsciously controlled by them or controlled by the strategies to fulfill those needs. So it isn't that we don't have needs, that you don't have things to do, that just living in constant awareness. Well, you've also got to make plans. You got to deal with some things that happened before so that you can plan some things that are going to happen, right? All of that is true, but the mind that you use to do that with can become a practice of becoming more and more consciously aware of doing one thing at a time. For those of us who are constantly trying to multitask, which science tells us we cannot do, but we still assume and assure ourselves that we can, that in fact we really have to bring our focus to do the thing that's in front of us, to be present to this moment. And the practice of it will become ingrained in us because you know what? It's our natural state. And we can unlearn what is unnatural about our thinking. Robert Brummett also says that all of this leads to transformation. Remember I said at the beginning that these 10 practices from the entire book that we'll cover in the series can transform your life. But what exactly is transformation? And why should you want that? It's kind of messes up the plan if you've got a plan, or the process, right? Transformation is the process by which we shift our identity from the personality to the authentic self. In other words, an internal and invisible process happens on the inside of us, but it ultimately impacts the visible and external aspects of our life, our health, our relationships and work, every facet of life. So transformation, here's the deal. Transformation happens with the slightest aha from the most internal center of your being. When you have an insight, when you have an aha in this moment, at some deep level within you, of letting go of some small thing, or becoming willing where you weren't willing before, to fall back into surrender where you couldn't let go before. When you find some little click, some new little spark or idea, when it happens at this point in you, it radiates out. It radiates an awareness, a shift, a change, a new vibration that will actually impact a larger and larger piece of the pie that is your life. In other words, there are things that are connected in ways you would never imagine that they were. There are things in your life that impact one another, that if you shift this one thing, suddenly it affects something way over here that you weren't even thinking about or working on. A relationship suddenly becomes easier, suddenly shifts. That's what transformation can do. It can come in from many kinds of processes, but in this particular one, it will be something that you'll begin to be able to put together as you practice your awareness. You'll discover a whole new dimension of reality. I had a therapist who described that kind of new function, a higher level of function. She would call it up-leveling. It was referred to as up-leveling. It's probably a process that's in some other, psychotherapeutic models, but it was news to me, and it really helped me to recognize that when I up-level, it's like I had the perception of going to another level in the house in which I've been living all my life and find that there's a whole new floor I hadn't explored, that there's a whole new thing. And this does impact and affect every aspect of your life, and it takes time to integrate, time to put it into place. Transformation is not translation, and translation I'll explain in just a second. Transformation is always spiritual, but not necessarily religious. It may require a new faith practice to support the change, as a matter of fact. In other words, when we transform, we don't get to control where we go. We don't get to control who goes with us in it or what we become. That's the whole point, isn't it? We become something we couldn't have guessed. We couldn't have known. I was a practicing Catholic, and I was doing a lot of work that was, I was working on aspects of myself and codependency that I didn't, that I had become aware of, and so I was working really hard on changing those patterns, thinking I was just cleaning up stuff inside of me. That's what I thought. I thought I was just like taking care of business that I didn't know quickly before other people figured it out, right? And before my outside started showing. And somebody was saying something about religion, and I said, no, I'm Catholic. I'm not interested in another, why don't you go to Unity? I'm like, no, I don't need to go to Unity. I'm Catholic, I just didn't understand. I didn't see any advantage to that. But as time went on, I discovered that some of the practices that were very, very important to me, things I was trying to change about myself, I was only getting re-upped on Sundays when I would go and hear the messages and the teachings of my long time, of my full life of Catholicism. And I couldn't hear it differently, and I found that it wasn't serving me anymore. It was keeping me stuck. So I set it aside, and I came to Unity to hear the message that was in concert with where I was wanting to go. I had no intention of becoming a minister. That wasn't why I came, but it is what happened. And again, transformation happens when you stay dedicated to your own growth and to your own development. Not all spiritual teachings are necessarily transformational either. Some of them are considered to be translational. Let me explain what that is. Some are just aimed at helping the individual to function better within the existing self or reality system. That's a good thing too. Teachings to improve our life rather than wholesale transformation, like better health, more prosperity, happier relationships, self-improvement, feeling better, just feeling better, feeling more at peace. All of those things are great, and those are all reasons to do the work or to follow a spiritual teaching. But recall that last week I talked about the Buddha in his, I don't know if it was last week, but the last time I talked here I was talking about the true nature. And the true nature of the Buddha really was that he sat under the Bodhi tree knowing that his heart had been opened in compassion, that his mind was clear, but he still wasn't free. And it was that last bit of temptation where Mara was tempting him, just as Jesus was tempted in the desert by the devil, that it was a process of really knowing who he was and going and attaching to a power greater than his physical self, greater than his individual self, connected to his true self. And he called on that greater self, and in that moment, he awakened. He became fully free. This is the commitment of moving, up-leveling to a whole new place of enlightenment. The transformational teachings challenge the arrogance and the delusions of the ego right at the core, turning its world upside down. Sometimes crises, health challenges, job loss, death of a loved one can provide also this type of introspection and accountability and that kind of change. I know countless stories, probably in your history as well, where some catastrophe, some crisis in your life forced you to look for something you wouldn't have looked for before, that you wouldn't have gone to do, or what you wouldn't have done, you wouldn't have moved to, you wouldn't have divorced if you hadn't been forced to. Whatever it is that has come into your life, it causes a wholesale change. And it isn't just the change itself, it's a willingness to see the truth, to feel the pain, to confront our fears, to find courage to live differently. That's what's transforming. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you that changes everything. Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. It's a way for us to realize that become single-minded. The most important thing in my life is that I am true to myself, that I am honest, that I am of service, that I reach out, and when I'm confused or concerned or I can't figure something out, I remember that peace is my goal and love is the way. Those are my mantras for me. That's what I try to remind myself, that when I get off track or things become hard or impenetrable, I just go back to the things that really matter to me. And those aren't just platitudes. They really matter to me. I want to see the truth. Only the truth matters to me. The capital T truth, not the Karen Tudor version. I live with that all the time. I want the real truth. I want, even when it contradicts the Karen Tudor truth, because it usually does. The thing is that I will find that I will get closer to the peace, and I will find a way to love in that moment. Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. This single-mindedness, finding that one pathway, is really the thing. And finding your way through awareness of what is operational in you gives you the tools to be able to make new choices and to realign yourself and question some of the things that have been guiding you all along. Surrender is the letting go of what is in the way of true freedom. So that's letting go with your will. That's the only willful thing you really do is surrender, but surrender in itself is not fully an act of will. It is a willingness to let go, but sometimes it is a click. It's a breaking open. It's a release. It is finally giving up something you didn't even know you were holding on to, that you didn't even know what you were holding on to it with. And then it opens and shifts. And all the machinations of ego you discover were distractions, delusions, energy drains, took you nowhere. Break out of unconscious, habitual thinking and seeing by seeing how you really think, and be willing to make shifts and changes to see the truth of reality as perceived by the field of your heart. The transformative practices we actually used in our meditation this evening, tonight's practice with radical self-awareness was the deep self-acceptance will be, Reverend Jean Marie will bring next week, but the body awareness exercise that we went through in this meditation, just really paying attention to how we're sitting and feeling, how our body is, the sensations, practicing that 10 to 20 minutes a day, just being aware of it. It's a transformational process, and then begin to notice how the thoughts parade through. So while you're watching your body, watch your thoughts. Watch the judgments that go across. Try not to engage, just watch them. You don't need to, if you notice that you have a reaction to it, oh, you feel shame, you feel guilt, oh, you're still doing that, you're disappointed. It's like, okay, I notice disappointment. I just keep feeling, I just keep being aware, I keep breathing. You will find that you will become larger and larger and larger than the container that you thought you were. The transformation process is one where we clear out the storehouse of our subconscious that we've been plying with all of our thoughts and feelings and judgments, pain and experience and all of that, and allow the superconscious, the light, the enlightenment to begin to heal it. We look for that through it, and we release out of our subconscious all of that accumulated dross that doesn't help us anymore. Robert Brummett says you can do this in your formal sitting, the 10 to 20 minutes a day that you make as a commitment, but you can also use daily routines to go into just body awareness and mind awareness when you're washing dishes or when you're taking a shower or when you're doing something, when you have brief downtimes like waiting at a stoplight or standing in line at the grocery store. You just notice your body. Notice where your hands are. Notice how you're breathing. Notice where it's tight. Notice where it's soft, comfortable. Notice how you're breathing, how you're feeling, how your heart is beating. When you're eating, you can become conscious of the bite, taste, smell, texture. Just become aware, just mindful. Every moment that you pull yourself out of just doing and running around with the thought whirligig going around in your head, and you can just stop it long enough to just notice, is gain. There's gain there. I don't know what it is. It's gain. I don't know what it's going to mean to you. Only you're going to know that. I don't know where it's going to take you. I don't know what transformation looks like in your life, but you're going to show us when you do it. Robert Brummett said his personal strategy also is to try to maintain continuous awareness of his hands whenever he's sitting down. Just Just sitting here talking, and then just noticing where his hands are, how his hands are. We're not talking about position. Maybe at first, we're talking about inside, like we did in the meditation. Inside. From the inside, how am I? And yet he's still very engaged with whatever's going on around him. More so, because he's aware of where his hands are. When he's standing or walking, he notices his feet. That's his practice. And it helps him to find one insight at a time, shifting, changing. Again, one thing from the very center changes multitudes of your life in amazing ways. Remember, the goal is not to feel better, though. It's to accept whatever happens, whatever you're feeling, whatever the emotion, even if it's pain, breathing into it, allowing it. To feel better or more peaceful or to see uniquely, it is not the goal. The goal is to see yourself and the world just as they truly are, without changing, fixing, doing anything different. Robert Brummett says, it's helpful to remind yourself that the intention of transformational practice is to go deeper into your personal and present experience so you can discover the greater reality that is already here. You're not conjuring anything up, you're revealing it to yourself. We experience, he says, the superconscious, the light, becoming ever brighter as we become infused with the light. And we see that we are the light itself. The light shines through us into the external world. We are in the world, but not of it, when we are living originally. Namaste.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.